Hey, welcome to the Articulate Ox podcast, where artists talk about the art that made them artistic. I am your host, Soma79. Thank you so much for joining us. My guest today is artist Katy Alexander. She makes these super cool sort of digital art collages, but she draws everything. It's sort of in the spirit of a collage, but it incorporates a lot of different elements from the news and pop culture and combines them all together in a way that I think is awesome. I love looking at them. We talk a lot about her art in the episode, so I'm not going to go into too much of a detail here. I show some examples of it. And we talk about STEM, which the education discipline or whatever you would want to call it. Apparently, I'm still learning. But science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, computer science, all that good stuff. And we talk about how that inspired her and a lot of her work. And I love Katy. She's somebody who just, you can tell she's somebody who wants to make the world a better place. And she knows how to start small and kind of build up big from there. And I don't know, we need more people like her in the world. This was a really fun conversation. We get into a lot of different areas about education, our own upbringing, and stuff like that. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much. And yeah, peace. Hey, welcome to the newest episode of the Articulate Ox podcast. I usually try to say the episode number, but I've gotten it wrong so many times, I'm just going to give up. My guest today is Katy Alexander, who is an artist who I've known for quite some time. Her art is quite cool, and we're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about STEM today and how that inspired her. And what's going on today, Katy?
Hey, thanks for having me.
No
What's
problem.
going on today? Not much. I have done very little this Friday. I've been very lazy.
Yeah, well, you're across the pond in England, in London area. I don't want to give exact coordinates, but so your day is already well underway. I just woke up about 10 minutes ago.
Uh,
Um,
so in the future, it's not bad. It's a bit cloudy.
Appreciate it.
We've already had lunch. Not a bad lunch.
Oh, I haven't had breakfast yet, but whatever. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about STEM and your art and all that good stuff. So your art, I don't even know how to describe. How would you describe it? Because that's probably better than me fumbling through it. And we'll show some pictures on the screen anyway. So you'll have a visual aid. So how'd you come upon your style? And yeah, take it away.
Yeah, how did I do it? I've always done collaging, like especially as a kid. Like I started out really young, just loving collaging, and I would spend hours cutting out or cutting up magazines and newspapers and have a mixture of kind of different medium. And then I migrated that to digital. So now I just draw the collages instead of cutting them up and pasting them.
So a lot of your work, it talks about current events. It's which
Yes,
I think
yeah.
makes sense because that would be something that you would have cut out from newspapers and magazines back in the day. And I would say pretty much all of it has some sort of a message. What do you want people to take from your art?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixture of current events and then probably like with most art, right? Something personal always creeps in there. And I was thinking about this when you asked me to come on your podcast. And at first I kind of freaked out and I was like, oh God, does my art actually mean anything? I don't know if it does.
Does any more art mean anything, or does all
Yeah, I
art
know
mean
that's
everything?
it. Does it
Who
actually
knows?
mean anything? Should it? Does this mean I'm a bad artist? And then actually I realized, yeah, it kind of does. I love the detail.
Me too.
And so while like in my art, there's a lot of fact, right? It's like things that have happened in the news. Um, I often think that like as humans, we look at the world around us and we perceive everything that's going on, right? It could be the great things, but also the injustices, but we kind of watch it as if we're watching a piece of art.
Mhm.
And we don't really do anything about it unless it impacts us directly. So, from kids, it could be bullying at school through to, war zones or famine, or I don't know, we seem to just watch what goes on like you would do as if you looked at a painting.
Are you saying that all the memes that I'm sharing to my Instagram stories aren't doing anything? Because that's I thought I was making a difference.
Um,
No, I know I
I don't know.
totally get what you're saying. Because one of the things that when I look at your art, I'm just now realizing this, is that so you have so much going on in one piece. It sort of reminds me about what it's like just to try to read the news and feel anything for more than a few seconds at a time. It's You'll see these things, especially when, I live out in kind of the boonies of Western Mass, and you watch the news and it goes back and forth between, the state of Ohio is on fire and nobody can breathe in the air. And then it goes to, hey, we're putting in, some new lights down in Northampton. And you're just
Oh,
like,
and then don't forget the puppy that got saved from like a
right.
crocodile.
And then the other puppy that needs a home, and then, 10 minutes of sports, and then, weather that's right half the time. And it's just
Yeah.
all becomes something that it's the juxtaposition of these things that are super serious with these things that really, that are probably serious to a small number of people or just human interest. It's just you don't know how to feel about it. It's just it takes you up and down, and you're on this emotional roller coaster of things that are supposed to be facts that are put through all these filters and everything, and you just end up feeling nothing and just sitting here sipping decaf coffee from your Alf mug.
And watching it
Well,
like you would if you went to a museum and you were looking at a piece of art, and you kind of just,
right.
you're desensitized by all the chaos, but also I think also as humans, it's really easy for us to not get involved, or to come up with excuses why we don't want to get involved and stand up for something because it doesn't affect us directly.
Right. And a
So
lot of
you're
us feel that you
easier to
can't
be a
make a difference
bystander.
anyway. Right. And I think a lot of people feel
Exactly.
they can't make any sort of a difference, but
Yeah.
the reality is that that's the only thing that ever makes a difference, is people, speaking up and actually doing something and taking to the streets. And, it doesn't always work, but, not doing it works,
Yeah, exactly.
0% of the time.
Yeah, and then each piece, I guess, depends on that time, like the time I draw it. So a mixture of, I guess, what's going on in my personal life plus the world, and it
Right.
becomes I guess, a brief glimpse of my brain.
Right. And it's also a bit of a time capsule too, because it is
Yeah.
truly, I'm looking at one right now, and I'm believing I'm looking at Boris Johnson popping off some champagne with the Christmas hat on. So I think I know what that's in reference to. Uh we got Putin wearing an I'm the gift sweater. I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
Putin,
yeah. That
right?
was my Christmas one.
Yeah.
That was Christmas 2021. So COVID
Yeah.
lockdowns. And it has a mixture of, yeah, there's Putin who thinks he's the gift, and that kind of reminded me a lot of his, the shots where he doesn't have a shirt on, he's
Yeah.
tackling bears, and
Riding a horse,
um
looking just good. Like,
yeah,
looking,
just looking good. And
yeah.
yeah, Boris Johnson having a party that he probably shouldn't have had.
It's
So
just
yeah, there's a lot in there. There's a little bit about a university professor who was, I believe, studying spiders and then falsified the findings. So that was all over the news over here, probably not in the UK, in the US.
No, that's I want to Google that though. Is like, what was he trying to say the spiders were not doing or not doing?
I'm trying to remember what he did. I think it was an ecology professor who they looked into his research, and I think he had falsified or made up. I'd have to go back and check the news article, but I believe he had like made up part of the article and the findings that he'd been working on. And so after a while they figured it out, and then I think he was put on leave, and I don't know what happened after that, because
Yeah.
these are like snapshots in time, right? I drew it and then I lost interest, I guess.
Yeah.
Move
It's
on to the next thing.
which is what really sucks, is because science and the sciences in general are under attack a lot. I mean, especially in my
Yeah.
home country, where it's like they'll take anything to try to discredit all education, it seems like, to some degree. And it's a shame when stuff like that happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess you don't want people educated, right? Then they can think for themselves.
I know, and that really seems like what's going on in this country a lot, is they just the amount of things that people don't want kids taught about is really quite insane. It's nuts. It's just it's our education system is pretty not great. For a country
Yeah.
that's supposed to be whatever, the greatest in the world, if you buy into that, our education system is certainly not that.
No, I don't know if this is true, but I think someone was telling me that in the US, like the teachers have to buy their own school supplies and pencils, and that just, if that's true, that just blew my mind,
It's
because
not like a requirement, but what happens is a lot of they wouldn't have it any other way. It's not like the schools are telling them to do it. Is the teachers, are stuck in the rock and the hard place, and they end up doing it because they want the kids to have a better education, and not like these teachers getting paid anything.
it's just teacher, like, it's such an awesome profession. It's just so undervalued by so many people. It's such a shame.
Right, they're glorified babysitters that you yell at more than you would yell at your normal babysitter. It's yeah, it's whatever.
You would have thought like homeschooling would have taught us all one thing, is they're freaking awesome.
Right, right. But the problem is adults have kids, and adults are so set in their own ways. They just want their kids to be little versions of themselves. Like it's amazing how many people I know that have kids that don't really want their kids to be independent human beings, it seems. And I see friends of mine that seem to be just, I don't know, I don't want to judge too harshly, but just more than happy to pass on their own prejudices and worse personality traits, oftentimes publicly to their children. I'm like, and then they would yell at a teacher over, a misplaced word or something. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I just I had a friend recently who sent me this text complaining about their school, and he's like, all the students there are such wokies, and they all care about their pronouns and getting rid of their privilege, but then they complain when they don't have the best, car in the world. And I'm like, okay, you're sort of you're taking something that is in some ways positive, that it's like you're teaching kids to have empathy, which is it's like, well, that's beautiful, empathy. And then you're comparing it to like, okay, well, you're still a young kid and you're still being brought up in a house where this stuff obviously is just taught to you that it matters. And it's one of those things that I find that a lot of people that tend to be on that side of the argument will take these two things that are totally unrelated and combine them. Like I had someone else over here post some meme that was like, they're like, a contradiction is the fact that you think that an 8-year-old can identify their gender, but an 18-year-old can't understand student loans. And I'm just like, those are two totally uncomparable things. It's like, the same reason why the military goes after 17-year-old kids is the same reason why colleges go after 17-year-old kids, because they know that they can easily manipulate them. And we live in a world, I guess, where some of the highest suicide rates is about people that are LGBTQ. And they're, as a child, they know these things, and they're put in a world where they're told they don't even exist or whatever. And a lot of those kids
it's mixing two
themselves.
completely different things. Like,
right.
You're
and
talking about
like
financial
this is a real point
understanding versus understanding who you are as a person, right?
And this person who posted this, I'm sure, couldn't explain to me how student loans work even now at their life, and that's the ironic thing. Right?
I'm gonna take the excuse that I'm in the UK, because I don't understand how they work in the US.
I did
my university in Europe. I don't know how you guys do it.
Right. I mean, I graduated college in 3 years because I looked at everything and go, it's not worth me spending all this money when I can just get my degree. But like, they sort of advertise college over here as like a very expensive party. I remember some people like, wow, do you want to leave early? Because I'm like, I don't want to spend another $30,000 to hang out with you doofuses again for another year.
No, honestly, like, university in the States is just, I mean, it's getting expensive here, but in the States, I genuinely just don't. It blows my mind how expensive it is. Like,
and the value goes. It's not like a lot of things that go up in price go up in value, but the value is dropping drastically.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people I always remember I was looking at going to law school. I was kind of at a crossroads maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I'm like, I could be a lawyer. What the fuck? Like, I can do this. And I thought about it, and I talked to my lawyer friends, and they're like, the problem is that it's not as secure of a profession as you think it is. There's a lot of unemployed lawyers out
there. Really?
That's what my lawyer friends told me. Maybe they just thought I was too stupid to pass the bar, but maybe they were just trying to be nice to me. But that it's not really a guarantee. And even if you see in healthcare, you see a lot of doctors. I mean, it used to be that if you were a doctor, people thought you were a millionaire. But there's a lot of doctors out there that aren't making, the money that I think they may have anticipated. Maybe their parents told them that they would, and they've spent a lot of money on this education. And there's really no going back. I mean, once you're that invested, it's that is what you're going to do. And And then you're always one lawsuit or one patient away from having your entire reputation tarnished. Like,
Oh yeah, like you get sued, you're kind of stuffed, right?
right. The amount of people I remember I was talking to a coworker years ago and they were
Because you know, in Europe we think, you know, Americans, they just like to sue people.
oh, they of course we do. But the thing is, like, I think that's calmed down a little bit because lawsuits have become expensive and
Yeah.
you don't and we have a justice system that doesn't always work. Even if you think you're right, there's a good chance you're not going to win, which, you know, that's the good and the bad of that is that it used to be there were people that could take on a case and really use it to make some change, but you don't really see that anymore. There are people that are above the law just because of the amount of money that they have. I mean, I think if you look at it
Yeah.
as our you know, our favorite former president over here who would be in handcuffs if he were any other person for the things that they've done.
Well, I've got him in one of my latest drawings, which I'll be finishing soon. So he's being sucked down a whirlpool.
Oh, he'll be missed. He'll be missed. Prefer a toilet, but I mean that's where he likes to put all of his classified documents. But you know, the ones that
Oh,
aren't blocking out
funny you say
his
that. I've
sunlight.
got that in one of my paintings too. I've got a golden toilet with classified documents.
Ugh,
I remember that
God.
being in the news.
What a time to be alive. What a time to be brain dead. It's more like it. So you wanted to talk a little bit about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which is I guess what do you call it? Educational discipline or I don't know what you
Yeah,
really
the
call it.
sciences, the
Right.
science, yeah, science, tech, engineering, maths.
Yeah. It's sort of the
It's kind of
belief
my
that this is the future. The future are these things, you know, and that
with
it's
with art. I think especially as technology advances more, you're gonna need more of the philosophy, the sociology, the ethics, the creativity side goes, and it probably always has gone really closely with STEM fields. Yeah, so like science and technology, like it probably has always gone hand in hand with creativity, but we lost track of that. Like so many famous scientists, or at least the ones we talk about, because there's so many amazing ones out there, they all had an incredibly creative side.
right.
So, you know, you get Einstein with his violin, you have so many scientists who are artists as well,
Like Da
or
Vinci,
musicians,
you know.
or yeah, Da Vinci. And it's this idea that they have to be separate, they should be separate. The creativity, no matter what you do, is actually great because it helps you problem solve, think about things differently.
Yeah. It's
So
funny.
I think
I have a
we need to
bachelor of
go together.
science in film, which is sort of an I was thinking about that the other day that for some reason my school gave me a bachelor of science rather than a bachelor of arts, even though I have a film degree. I'm like, I guess I'm a film scientist now.
Hey,
Hey, whatever. You know, put that on my resume. See if that gets
that's
picked
cool.
up.
I like that, film scientist.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the STEM fields, and I think it's a lot of my working background. So is in either like scientific publishing or science tech, and so there's a lot of issues with diversity when it comes to the science fields. And so kind of on the side, one of the areas where I put my drawing to is creating science superheroes.
Yes,
So
those were
yeah.
very cool. So let's talk about
Wow,
that for
thanks.
a little bit. What was describe that project a little bit because you can describe it better than me and like
Yeah.
what your intent was behind
Um,
it.
so behind it's probably my daughter, which kind of the really like infatuated with space. And she was this like little thing, and I picked her up from school one day. She was like, "Oh, can I be an astronaut?" And I was like, "Of course you can." She goes, "Yeah, but there are not that many female astronauts." And I was like, mortified one that she would think that,
Right.
because like at home we're so careful to have diverse role models. So I went home and I started looking at all of our games and books, and you know, there you go, especially
Yeah.
games. And so it kind of took me on the journey of making more games for her. And then I started taking, you know, famous scientists, but a diverse range. And I started making card games and coloring books and things like that. And so I'll find someone, learn about what their discoveries or inventions, and then those become their superpowers, and stories will come out of that. So we've got games, and we've got our first comic book, which launched recently, which takes a famous Japanese scientist and a kind of, if she were like a young kid, how she would have gotten her superpowers, and she fights off the, you know, the evil Doctor Oxidization, saves the world.
You're awesome. That's awesome.
So it's I don't know, there's just not enough role models out there. Like I'm dyslexic. I didn't get when I was young, I was told I couldn't do much, right? Like you're not going to amount to anything.
Right.
And
I have ADHD. I was just told I was lazy all the time. It's just
yeah,
like,
yeah, you're
I'm
not
like,
trying
really?
hard enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like I'm like, you're not trying hard enough to help me solve this problem. Like,
Yeah, you're not
really?
trying hard enough. Why can't you read yet?
I
You know?
know. It's
Like, yeah,
just
I'm doing it on purpose.
yeah. It's just I don't know. I remember
Yeah.
people would be like, well, if there's a gun to your head, then you'd be able to do it. I'm like, no, I'd forget the gun was there once every 4 seconds. Is like what would
Yeah.
really happen. And like, despite how crazy that sounds, that's really the way my brain works. You know, it's a survival technique to some degree, even though I guess I might get shot in the head.
Yeah. And I think people just don't like, whether it's young kids or even adults, right? They just don't, there's just so many biases out there still, right? On what people think is.
Yeah, it's funny because like I sort of mentioned that thing about the friend with that posted the sort of thing about trans kids, and
Yeah.
I'm like the amount of times that I'm non-binary. I don't I'm not totally I haven't told everybody about this. It's like really like do I need to make my entire life calling my friends and telling them this like. But the amount of times people will say something that's kind of fucked up along those lines, and I'll kind of call them on it. And it's amazing how quickly they backpedal off something that they felt so strongly about, or they claim it's a joke. And I have to explain to them that a joke
Oh
has a
yeah, yeah,
setup and a
yeah,
punchline. And I'm like, okay, well, explain the joke to me. And they obviously can't do it.
yeah.
The amount of people who throw the word woke around and I ask them what woke means, and they give me a definite, they either can't or give me a definition that is just not even close to it. You're just like, okay, cool. Glad you're using these words, and I'm glad you're using them to criticize others because you're doing a fantastic job at it.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, or it's a joke, or you just didn't understand it correctly. They meant something else, and you're like,
Right. No,
no,
I got it. I got it. Yeah. Or then
I follow what you're saying.
right then to give some people credit though, that when you do try to talk to them about it and you explain like, look, when I was a kid and I knew I had these feelings and I was severely depressed and it was just a very dark period of my life. Like if I was able to go to school and at least be acknowledged, at least have a word to put with how I felt, you have no idea how much that would have changed my life. But it's like
Yeah,
because a lot of people are too worried to have to explain to their kids that their kid's going to somehow turn to them and go, I want to have a sex change at my 9th birthday. It's like it's fear, and it turns into fear mongering, and it's they forget the individual, or maybe they don't care about the individual. It's like there's a lot of
yeah.
people who are just looking for someone to step on.
But I think that's like a lot of what drives even my art, right? It's that like, is it that people don't think about the individual? Is it because they're scared of the individual? Like as humans, like what makes us either be so closed, narrow-minded, biased, or just able to watch things that we know are not right,
Right.
right? And just like let them unfold.
I think it's because they feel their way of life may be threatened. And I think that that is something that's intrinsic to human beings, where it's like, okay, like maybe in theory, I agree to these things, but I don't want my day-to-day life to have to change because I agree with them. And then slowly that turns into like, well, agreeing with it is too hard, and then just doing nothing. Like people intrinsically feel so defensive about everything.
Yeah. And I guess then you'd have to question all your life choices, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then
And then
it's like you have to question a lot of people don't want to have to confront the people in their lives. Like they don't want to, a lot of people don't want to grow because growing means that they have to tell somebody else that they have grown and that person may not like it. You know?
yeah.
I had an
Yeah.
instance like I got promoted at my job about a year or so ago. And I've been promoted a bunch of times in my career, and I usually tell people, and they're like, "Oh, congratulations," and we move on. This was the first time that I told people, and the reaction I got was actually negative from some people. And
What, for promotion?
it was more of like, "Oh, yeah, you again," or like it was more of like it told me more about how they felt about their station in life. And I'm like, I'm not doing this to throw this in your face. I'm just like, this is what happened to me today. Like
That's
if you,
really sad. Like, how
it
could
was
you not
odd.
be happy for someone?
I
I'm like,
know. It's odd. Like there's this word, I think it's compersion, which is the feeling of when of feeling joy at somebody else's joy. And that's something that I can relate to, is that like I feed off other people. Like other people's negative energy will drag me down, but other people's positive energy will help bring me up, because it reminds you, even if something good happens to somebody and it has nothing to do with you, it's never going to help you, whatever, it still reminds you that there's hope in the world and that good things do happen.
Yeah. But I guess also it comes back to what you said earlier, which was it's about empathy, right? Like teaching kids empathy. Like we need to teach kids empathy.
Right. I had someone say, we were talking about the chat, the AI chat thing, and they were saying one of their kids spit out something that was like pretty much as good as the kid could have written on their own. He's like, well, why learn anything? I'm like, well, why don't we start focusing on things like how we treat each other, or credit card interest rates, or things that actually, if you taught kids, may impact their lives in a positive way going forward. I mean, it is important that you can write a paragraph. It's important that you can speak, but I mean, I haven't picked up a protractor in 20 years, and I spent a lot of my time in school messing around with protractors. And
I have no idea what a protractor is.
oh, it's something you use in geometry, the little plastic like ruler thing that has a curve on
Oh,
it. Yeah.
right. Okay, I do know what those are.
You probably have a fancy word for it over there that us Americans don't know.
I'll add it to my vocab. I'll use it tonight and just be like, I know what protractor is.
Protractor and comparison. If you know the rest. I don't know if that's the right word. It's a word I haven't used in a while, but so in terms of STEM, this is the term that I didn't hear. I'm guessing it's not that old, or if it is, it hasn't been in the popular lexicon for that long. I think the first time I probably heard it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. It feels like sort of a TED Talky type of thing, but it
that's probably a good point. I wonder when it was. I don't actually know when it started getting used, but it has been, yeah, the last kind of like 5 to 10 years. I think it's been a lot more used, and science communication has become a job of its own in its own right, and has become more important even in people's career paths if they're researchers, being able to communicate the science, which, with fake news and all of the things like anti-vax or any of those types of things where the facts are being ignored, it's increasingly important, right? Like,
yeah,
you to be able to communicate the science in a way that people can understand. Otherwise, what's the point of it?
Now, is that something that's taught? Because that does seem like a very good point, that we can have all the science in the world, but when we live in a culture that a 12-second soundbite from a pompous 80-year-old idiot is somehow taken as gospel, or I would say even gospel is taken as gospel, which, whatever. Is part of STEM about getting better at communicating the facts around these things? That is definitely a struggle that we have now, is getting the facts on the same platform as the bullshit.
Yeah, I think increasingly, yeah, it's a huge part of it. It's like, can you communicate what you're doing, and can you do it in a way that people understand and can engage with, so that we can take them on the journey. And part of science is iterative. You might think for ages that vitamin D is bad, right? I'm just going to make something up here.
Yeah.
But then you'll start to have discoveries over the years where you start to find out, oh, actually it's good. But as science progresses, as our technology progresses, you learn more and more, and so things change. And that's why one day you'll hear this is good for you, the next day it might not be.
Like eggs. I mean, we've been on a roller coaster ride with eggs our entire lives.
Yeah. Don't eat eggs, cholesterol, all these things.
Right.
And it's kind of the public understanding that it changes, right? It's iterative. It's not right. Something that's always, it's not set in stone for most things.
Right. And that's one thing too, that I think some people who just don't want to accept some of the things that science gives are like, well, they were wrong about this. And you're like, well, it is an iterative process. Like, we have new technology all the time that allows us to make better decisions, but it's like, you're not always going to get it perfectly right the first time, but if you get it 50% right, you're 50% ahead of where you were before. And, we're doing the best that we can.
Yeah. And like teaching kids that, and I know, like, in science they do it a lot at school. They start to learn about the scientific method and asking questions and putting their hypothesis down. But at some point as well, like, I don't know where we lose the excitement that we teach with science.
Right.
Like once they get
maybe it's the 20 millionth time we've dissected a frog.
Yeah, and then it becomes all kind of like textbooky, and why is it not incorporated with all the other stuff around us to make it fun? You know, why are we not learning in different ways and encouraging kids to like just question? And yeah, especially with a lot of the technology, like even chat GTP, right? We should be questioning what it feeds back to us, because the biases that are put into it are being spurred back out in some shape or form. So,
and those are the skills that are useful to teach somebody. And I went to BU and learned about communications. They taught a lot about media bias and things like that, and actually got people thinking. But this is for somebody. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm paying ostensibly $30,000 for an education, and finally we're getting down to these things. And a lot of what my high school education was reciting facts. Many of them,
yeah,
we later find out weren't even true. And I don't know what, it's not like I'm ever in a meeting where someone's like, I don't know, like, what's the capital of Zanzibar? It's like, yeah, it's readily available information. And it's like,
yeah, now it's like, I'll just Google that.
right. And I think to some degree, people are like, well, that makes everything worse. But our brain capacities are basically that of, like, we're designed to be able to remember like the amount of people that live in a village of like 80 people.
Yeah.
And we're confronted with more information than we can absorb. And that's not going to go away. There's going to be more information made every day. We're making more information right now. And I think accepting that we have to put certain filters in place isn't a terrible thing, and accepting that we can't know everything. And there's like this certain, like, people love seeing people fail, and they love laughing at people failing, and it's just utterly ridiculous that like failure is the first step towards success.
And it's like how some of the best discoveries of our times have happened. Like there's a really famous example is Kevlar. So the scientist working on it, that wasn't what she was doing at first. I think it was for tires. And then eventually failure.
Yeah.
There's Kevlar, which is used worldwide today and is like an essential part of like body armor and other things.
And my Subaru still doesn't have bulletproof tires.
No. And that's like technically a failure, right? Like,
right. And there's also this thing too, where if somebody changes their mind, they're a flip-flopper, and you're just like, no, I just got more information and I kept thinking. Like, I remember someone said that people stop listening to new music the same year they lose their virginity. And I don't know if that's true or not. I think I wouldn't be surprised. It might just be a coincidence, but I think a lot of people stop learning. It's like, I've collected these facts and this is what I got, and I've done learning at this age, and these are the facts that I'm going ahead with now. And anything against that is just like,
I think I would far more trust someone who changes their mind,
right,
as the ability to change their mind, than I would someone who doesn't.
Yeah. Our society is not made for gray area. It's not made for people to think things through. You're considered weak a lot of times if you don't have a strong opinion right away. And we live in the hot take era. And it's so ridiculous how often I'll go on to like a Facebook group and just see like a benign thing about someone posting about like The Simpsons, and how many hot takes appear underneath it. And just like the same ones repeated. I'm like, well, this is probably a pretty lukewarm take. And it is everybody, the race to be first is in front of the race to be right. Yeah. Because people want the emotion of feeling like they're right more than they actually care about being right, which is what's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And and in a lot of things, being wrong means that might not be the only thing about their life that they're wrong about.
Right. And that's sort of where too, people can't live in a gray area. Is they can't accept, a lot of people can't accept their own failures either, which, God damn, I failed a lot in my life.
Yeah, I did too. And actually from all of those failures came the best things afterwards. Right. I think like I'm kind of like thinking, and they're never pleasant at the time, right? But
right.
So then are they really failures?
Right. But teaching kids to accept failure is also an important thing. When I was a kid, I was made to feel horrible because I sucked at sports, and I was told that I was lazy, and I was told that I didn't try. And the reality of my head is, I knew as a kid that these coaches in their short shorts and their whistles were morons. And I knew that they were pushing me towards something that I didn't care at all about, that didn't matter at all in my life, and that I was being forced into. And as an adult, I'm more happy that I stuck with that stance than I was in being like, okay, I'm gonna get dressed up like all the other kids and be part of this team with these people that just bully the shit out of me. And you're just like, I was just made to feel horrible for failing.
Yeah, but see, and I don't even think we should be using the word failure, because I think it's only a failure if you don't learn anything from it.
Right.
You have nothing like you can take away from the experience. And it's definitely not a failure if you try again, or you try in a different way, or you pivot, or you come to realize that wasn't needed. I just don't think failures, it's not the right word.
It's funny.
We use it with kids and stuff, but it's not the right word.
Right. I made this album that I haven't released yet called Drinking Songs for Children. It's coming out. I actually don't even know when it's going to come out now, but it's been done for about a year. I went out and got some of my favorite hip hop artists to appear on them,
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. But then my plan after that was to make a film to go with it, which is basically and I've been working on this for a year and a half. And this morning, I think, is the day I woke up and said, I'm not going to do this. I think it bothered me that I'm probably gonna have to tell people that this thing I've been working on is not actually gonna happen. But if that's the worst of it, I feel like I built myself sort of this cage that everything in my life is filtered through. Is it gonna be working on this film? And I realized that it's no longer worth it anymore. But
it could become something else in the future, right?
Exactly.
Like there are drawings that I've started, and they're, at the time I'm like, and I guess like most artists, you're like, oh, this is crap, right? Like I can't, I'm terrible at what I do, right?
Yeah.
And I just leave it. And then one of them I picked up, and it's how I got into the medium of the digital drawing for the collages. And I picked up some of the old ones that I just left because for me, it was like I failed at them. There's that word again.
Yeah.
I failed at them. And now
so let's say you failed them. Let's just say you were a total.
Right?
Let's just say you were a total loser. Okay.
I'm a total loser, right? And now I've got it. And then some of them I'm actually, painting now too. So it's like, it wasn't a failure, right? It's like it just wasn't the time. And then it morphed into something else, and it became something better for it, because I tackled it again when I was ready with kind of fresh eyes, I guess.
Yeah. And it's funny. There's a lot of people who throw the word failure around, and people who have never tried anything. And I see that a lot with, we're both artists. We both live in a world where there are critics, and not just the critics that are actually knowledgeable, that actually do their homework, but the critics of those same hot takes on Facebook, where you're just like, okay, like you have never done anything in your life, creative or anything, and yet you need to take like somebody to task because episode 4 of this show wasn't as wonderful as episode 2. And you treat this like as an injustice in the same level as,
Shaman.
Right. Or it's just, people have this inability to sort of understand that what things they should be mad about and what things they shouldn't. And
yeah. And it's so subjective too, right? Art, it's like,
it's about control too. They just want,
it's so, yeah, it's just so weird. Like my best friend, we go to museums together, and she has a style, like the style of art that she really likes is the one I genuinely can't get my head around. Like if you've got like a plain canvas with like a line through it, I kind of stare at it and go, oh.
I kind of like stuff like that a little bit, but like not when it's done with intent, and when it's done in the right context. Like,
yeah,
it's like there was a day and time for that, but to do it now is different than it was to do it in the 70s when it was a response to something,
Yeah. And so I think that's the detail, right? And it's like, and so I can appreciate it from a kind of historical, like that it's time in history. I look at it, and it's not an art that inspired, like inspires me.
It doesn't stir things up.
But then the art that I like, she hates, and it's so subjective, right? Like,
yeah,
we all like different stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. There's this, I mentioned this in a couple of episodes, but there's this podcast called How Did This Get Made? And it's about bad movies, or movies that are just basically how did they get made. And some of them are truly terrible. Some of them were multi-million-dollar movies. Some were made for $20. But I found that while watching these movies, I enjoy them more than when I watch some of these like Oscar whatever level movies that are just sort of a message wrapped up in a dollar bill, wrapped up in a desire to get, like, there's an earnestness to them that I think is not there in a lot of things that are cranked out by major studios with the intent of producing something that's supposed to be earnest and provocative. And
Yeah.
there's something to just letting your creativity go without boundaries and seeing what happens and not trying to make it about success. Because that was when I first started doing paintings that people liked. I was like, we got to start selling them now. And what I found is that trying to monetize it, and you end up trying to monetize your friendships, which is horrible, which doesn't work. And I see people in art groups that get so offended when their friends opt out of their email marketing lists about their art. I'm like,
You get too much email anyway.
Right. And you're trying to monetize a friendship. Understand that some people are not going to like that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, gosh, monetizing it, I wouldn't even know where to start. And it's kind of like, I guess most of us do art because it makes us have, like, it brings feelings out, right? Like
right.
there's a feeling behind it, and it either makes you feel really good, or it helps you express feelings that are hard to express, or can help you deal with trauma, or like, I'm guessing most of us, that's what drives us.
Yeah, I think so
It's
too.
it's the creative process, right? It's not necessarily the monetization of it, although that would be useful at times.
It's funny too, because I don't think a lot of people walk into the Sistine Chapel and look up and go, gee, wouldn't Michelangelo get paid for that?
Yeah.
It's like over time, it's the money is, I don't know. I think everything has to be tied back to money for a lot of people. And it isn't really like that. And there's so much stuff that sells that's just terrible. It's like a lot of the things that people, the awards, for a lot of these things, the awards should be given to the marketing department and not the people who actually made it, because the marketing department is what made me care. And we both work in marketing.
As my day job's marketing, I'll go for that.
Yeah. And it's true, because it's definitely, I remember this time when I heard the first big 50 Cent album, Get Rich or Die Trying, and they had tried to sort of position it. I don't know if they explicitly said this, but the idea was like, this is in the realm of the Biggies and the Tupacs, whatever. And the first time I heard it, I'm like, oh, this is marketing. This is not the same thing as the Biggies and the Tupacs. This is something that was manufactured to sort of be like that. And despite he did have a crazy story about getting shot all those times, but like the end result felt like a marketing piece. And I remember feeling this deep disappointment over, like, oh, damn it, they got me. And I don't know. That was around like 2001. I'm like, okay, well, the marketing of art is sometimes the bigger art than actually the piece itself.
Probably goes for a lot of marketing. It's funny 'cause in marketing we get a bad rap, but it's not always the case, right? And I don't know, as a marketing professional, if sometimes I see things and I'm like, I totally just fell for that.
Yes.
But kudos.
Right.
Well played.
But you know what I'm not falling for is the amount of times that I see people who are like, what if we just change that button on the email from black to red? And it's like they think that that's somehow going to brainwash somebody into wanting the product because the button is now red. And I'm just like, what do you think? I'm like,
have you A/B tested that?
Right. And it's like, have you ever bought something because the button is red and not black? And it's
have you A/B? Yeah. Like I was talking with some ex-colleagues sometime this week, like last night, maybe, I can't remember when. And we were talking about emojis and subject lines. And apparently an emoji in a subject line just gets really good open rates.
Yeah.
Now it blows my mind because I see them in subject lines and I hate them.
Me too.
But apparently most people really like them.
And it's like that sort of, there was what if we put your first name in the subject line? I'm like, oh, this email really knows me. I'm like, the fine people at LL Bean decided they remembered my first name because I typed it in a form once. I feel so honored. It's like,
but then there's so many people out there who do, and it's just like, and I guess it's kind of like art, right? It's so subjective. It's like you don't. So you got to know your lists and your segmentation, but it's.
So I want to talk about the piece behind you, because when we first came on, I was like, did you print that out? I thought maybe it was like a print of like one of your other ones, but I'm gonna put on the old spectacles here so I can
so it's a painting. I don't know if I can't get any closer because of the laptop cable.
Yeah, it's cool. So you actually hand painted that?
Yeah, it's one of the ones I drew it first, and then I painted it.
It looks remarkably similar in crispness to the actual. That's really impressive.
Yeah. So and then I'm debating whether or not I actually make it 3D by adding things onto it. Like, okay, this is going to sound really creepy,
Go
but
for it.
my daughter's got like lots of spare Barbie arms, right? Like,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
I've been kind of debating whether or not I make it 3D because I'm happy with the painting, but not enthusiastic about it. So I kind of want to, I don't know, do something different.
I think it's beautiful. I think, I'm looking to the right on the one I mentioned before on my screen, looking at that one, and like I love them both, but the painted one has a certain warmth to it that I think comes from the limit because you're limited the amount of the colors you can use, and the light hits it differently. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a warmth to that I think enhances the digital versions.
Yeah, and you get so this is it's not oil paint, so you don't get the same texture. Like you
Right.
can't get this like I
Yeah.
don't know.
It would be
I'm
hard to do oil paints and something like that. I mean, that's more of a job for
Yeah, so it's
acrylics, I think.
acrylic, and I'm not as used to acrylic, so I haven't quite mastered getting that depth that you can get with oil.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because I also love the smell of turpentine
Careful, don't get
and
too
oil paint.
close.
Like I really do.
Right.
Um, but we're in a flat, right? So you
Right.
start
I
using
remember
oil
that.
paints
Yeah.
and like your living space just stinks afterwards. So
Yeah. One of the things that I really like about your pieces is that there's not a lot of shading in them. Like there's a lot of like flat colors, yet there's still a lot of depth, which is
oh yeah.
something that I've never really looked at a piece and considered that before. But like, obviously when you're making art, a lot of the depth comes from the shading and the shadows and the contrasting color and like the shades of colors. But you don't really use much of that here, but there's still a full experience where you feel the depth of everything despite the absence of that. I think that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I always kind of go backwards and forwards between do I start adding shading? Should I not add shading? And one of the recent ones I'm working on now, I'm trying shading, but I actually think I like it without.
Yeah. Because
Um,
I try to put it into my head and I don't know that it adds anything. Because like that's the beautiful thing about digital art is you can add it all and
yeah,
push one button and it all goes away, or turn the layer off and on. But like, I don't know that it's enriches because to some degree, I think the shading is part of tells you where to look. And I think one of the beauties of your pieces is that they don't do that. They allow you to wander, and they're not. There is obviously composition that's leading you in certain directions, but looking at them, so you somehow have the feeling of absorbing it all at once and absorbing it one piece at a time. And I don't know.
yeah, and it's meant to draw you in and wander so that you hopefully stop. We're all rushing around, kind of being bombarded by all everything,
It also
phone,
gives you the message that the
everything.
background is important as the foreground, because if you were to add
Yes.
shading to some of these pieces, the stuff in the background would be harder to see. And I think that's also metaphorically, what life is like. The
Yeah,
background is
exactly.
oftentimes
Yeah.
more important than the foreground.
And it's all in the detail, right? Like let's stop and pay attention to the detail, whether that's,
Yeah.
just enjoying a walk in the park and actually really observing what's around you, like trees and flowers, to paying attention to the detail of what might be going on with the person that you're talking to, right? That's across from you. Like, is there something you need? Like, that's part of empathy too, right? Like, what's
Right.
going on? Like, are we paying attention to that detail, or are we just not, we don't care about the individual, comes back
Right.
to that.
And
Yeah.
it's like, are we teaching kids the value of listening too? Like not just listening to your teacher, but listening to other people and reading their emotions and understanding what they're going through,
Yeah. And
because
listening with all the senses, right? Like, it's not just the ears. Like, can we
right.
listen with all the other senses
Can we
in
listen
some respect?
without looking at our phone at the same time too?
Yeah.
And like and understanding what our body language tells people and just
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, which is a concept that I think is lacking in a lot of
Yeah. And so
people.
many people think they have it, and you're kind of like, no.
Right. Because
No.
you're also school is an environment where whether it's implicitly stated or not, you're there to compete to some degree. You're competing. The students are people are comparing grades. There's a competition there over grades.
Oh yeah.
There's a
Kids
competition
do
over
that. Kids
valedictorian.
compare themselves all the time, like all the time. Even if
Right.
it's an environment where it's not encouraged, they're gonna compare themselves.
Right. And I think we're both old enough that at least for me, I look back at my my high school and things like that, some of the people who were destined for success from high school did not end up there. And some of the people who I think were probably more in the middle of the pack, ended up having the longer, happier, more successful lives.
Yeah. And
And,
the happier would be for me like the successful.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because success is just, I don't know, it's rammed into you, right? Like you get a job, you get, being successful is getting to, the highest position you can. And then you've got one life, you look back and did you enjoy it?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like, were you content?
If you spent your whole childhood being told you had to do this, that you get into the school so you can get this job, and then you realize you never even really wanted that job, and you lost all this time of where you could have actually been yourself. And then because you've made those mistakes and don't really want to admit it, you're going to push those same mistakes on somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's,
Yeah. And kids just do it. Like they compare themselves like, I don't think as humans, right? I don't think we can actually, I think it's just like a fundamental human behavior on some level.
right. It's fun. I
I
had
mean,
I
this
don't know.
encourages it, right? So
Yes. Yeah. I I had a mentor in the comic book industry for a while, and I was trying to work on comic books, and she worked on like for DC, Marvel, all that stuff. And we had a session where she was showing art, and or I think I brought up a picture from a comic book that I was interested in. She was like talking about all the things that she would do. She's like, my brain goes to all the things that I would do differently about it, and I'm like, I'm glad she said that because I never do that. Like I'm very accepting of when I open up a comic or open up everything and see art. I don't have that instinct. Go, oh no, that's not right. They should have done it this way. I'm always very accepting of, okay, this is what they did, and even if it's not what I did, this is what they did.
yeah, and they may, that's their style, that's their reason, that's their
Right.
yeah. No, I
Jumping
agree.
to you, jumping to you're wrong, I think is not the right way to be.
No, because they're getting very philosophical. Is there a right or wrong in art?
Right.
Right? Like,
Right. But like the way art is taught when you're younger, I mean, I remember, I mean, obviously, there's only so much you can really teach like a third grader about the masters, but like it's always the same 5 or 6 masters. It's like, there, and I don't know whether it's still that way, but I I had a conversation on an episode that is upcoming about Basquiat, and we were talking about how in our lifetime there's only really a handful of individuals that that were alive the same times that you and I were alive that have really been treated that way. It's like Warhol, Basquiat, Banksy, Shepard Fairey, maybe, but like there's not that many of them. And it's great to study those people because they're all worth studying, but you're also missing everybody in between in all those ideas that didn't quite make it to to an Obama poster.
yeah, yeah. There's so much out there. Like one of my favorite things is the smaller art exhibitions or the smaller galleries or the smaller where you get more of just like the local talent, right? The stuff that you wouldn't see elsewhere, and you always find gems, right? And you just find stuff where you can
Right.
stop and just stare at it for hours.
Right. And I think
Okay,
some
maybe not
people
hours. I probably couldn't sit still for hours, but
I've seen some people have a so what attitude to some of this stuff. And I'm just like, what are you doing with your life? I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know.
And so, yeah, so what is that's kind of the question. So what? So answer it.
Right. And it's fun. I've lately taken that attitude towards television. I don't want to turn into one of those people who just shits on TV. But in the past few months, I've realized that unless there's something on that's actually serving a purpose, even if it's just soothing me a little bit, it's like I don't have the TV on for no reason anymore. And I think I used to, but now I don't turn it on unless it's purposeful. It's not like, oh, it's the end of the day, whatever. I was watching Wheel of Fortune the other day for the 100th time, and I'm just like, this show makes me feel
Is
miserable.
that still on?
It is. It's still Vanna White and Pat Sajak.
No way.
Yeah. But like the rules have changed. And this week was couples week. And I was just like trying to watch these people, I don't know, fumble through this nonsense.
Oh my God, I can't believe that's still on. Wheel of Fortune. And then there was like another one I remember watching as a kid. It's It's a family, like two families
Oh,
against each
Family
other.
Feud. That's still on.
That's it. Family
Yeah,
Feud.
that's
Yeah.
they've cycled through a million hosts on that show. A lot of the hosts of Family Feud have met tragic ends, which is kind of odd.
Really?
Yeah, I remember a few of them had back in the day. I don't know. Now it's Steve Harvey, and that guy's gonna live forever. But yeah,
Oh God. So I see things in cartoon format a lot of the time, right? Like my imagination is quite cartoony,
yeah.
like my paintings. And so now I just have like a really good image of a Family Feud illustration with like how all these random people have died.
But that's really impressive. I mean, I've never heard anybody sort of say that before. But I was somebody who for years was good at being able to take an image and copy it and draw that. But then there was a whole other thing for me where I'm like, okay, now I can do that. Now I need to start pulling things from my own brain. And it is hard to try to come up with a scene in your brain that you're going to transform onto a page. But you're the first person I've heard say you actually see things like that. And I think that's
Yeah,
actually
I see things in like kind of the cartoon format, but I do then struggle sometimes to then put it down, right? Because the way it is in the brain is just that's what it would be perfect like that. And I never
right.
actually completely can replicate it. But yeah, I'll often see things in imagery.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's like it's like there's certain things that there are colors that can only exist on a screen that can't exist in real life because of the way the light hits, and it's like that's sort of the same thing with your brain where it's like, well,
Yeah, the colors are very like you
yeah.
can get so many nuances that you just struggle on the screen. You can, I guess, to a certain extent, but you do struggle to get the same nuances. And
Yeah, I had a dream once where I did a song with Eminem, and it was me. And the song played numerous times in my dream. And in the dream, everyone's like, "Yo, you killed Eminem on this song. You're way better." And literally, the whole song played numerous times in the dream. I woke up, did not remember. I'm like, "Damn it!" But I mean, it was really me telling me it was better because it was all in my head.
I hate it when it happens.
I know.
For years as a teenager, I trained myself to remember dreams. So I would have this like little notebook, and every time I woke up, I would write it down. And I came up with some really wacky short stories from that. But you can kind of teach yourself to, but then I stopped because I don't know, like life got in the way or
Yeah.
whatever. And now I don't remember them at all. Like I remember stuff like that, and then I can't wake up and be like, oh, what was that song? I wouldn't remember the song either. It's like I don't, yeah.
I for a while was obsessed with training myself how to lucid dream, which for those
Is
who don't
that
know,
really a thing?
it
Did you
is.
manage?
I did it a few times. So no, lucid dreaming is when you're dreaming, but you know you're dreaming, and therefore you have full control over the dream. So I had this dream once that I would have super realistic dreams. I still have dreams that I had a dream a few weeks ago that I woke up yelling. It never happened to me before, but I was having an argument with family members, and it got me so upset. I literally woke up and was screaming before I even knew it. I probably should go talk to a therapist. I had this dream where my friend and I, from when we were kids, we were in the Natick Mall, which is the mall that I actually used to live in. My ex and I had a condo there, so that made it feel real because it was, the setting. It was a condo attached to the mall, and like we were kidnapped, and we were taken on this. We were like thrown in the back of a truck, and it was just really scary and it kept getting more and more intense. And at a certain point, we were in actually, what? The mall thing hadn't happened yet. All the other stuff happened first. At a certain point, we were taken into a room, and I felt I'm like, it was one of those things where it felt so real. I'm like, this has to be a dream. And I said to myself, if this is a dream, I can make a banana appear on that table. And I made the banana appear on the table. And as soon as it did, I got up and walked out of the room, and I was in the mall. And that was actually the first time the mall was in a dream. And I was like, okay, now this is a safe setting. And then I woke up a few minutes later, and I was like, wow.
Oh wow. See, I always wondered if it's actually like really a thing.
It is. And so then I got into reading about it. And then it was funny. As with most things in your life, this is gonna make me sound terrible, but I'll just put it out there anyway. As with most things in your life, it turns to sex pretty fast, because one of the next times I was able to have it, it was like, okay, now this is where we're going. But I started doing that thing where it's like, when you're playing a video game and you can build your own character.
Yeah.
Like and it's like, it's like you choose the thing. I started doing that for like 30 minutes in my dream. Then I'm like, all right, well, whatever. Now it's time for action. And that's when I woke up. But I mean, I've had
Should have been
other
faster.
ones. Yeah, and I had other ones where I remember I had one where I was in an office and this pro wrestler attacked me, and I knew it was fake. I remember CM Punk attacked me in an office. But the problem that I would run into is that it's sort of like the same problem I have when I'm skiing, is that when
Yeah.
I've only skied a few times, but when I get up there, I get up and I'm going, and then I become aware that oh my God, I'm actually going, and then you're like, well, now what do I do? And then I fall over. And the same thing would happen with a lucid dream, where I was only able to hold on to it for a short period of time, because once I realized what was happening, I
You
would
wake
get
up.
I would get almost like a shot of adrenaline over the excitement over it. And but the thing is, it's a dream. You don't know it's like the time is totally distorted. But it happened to me enough times that it is possible, and it happened to me around times that I was trying really hard to make it happen. And so, you know,
Yeah, that's cool. God,
yeah,
what could you do? I mean, you could do some cool stuff. I'd probably fly.
yeah, that's one of the things
I'd
that I think.
totally fly.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild experience, but there's the training yourself to do it and the training yourself to stay in it, and I never really got that far into it. I think it was a time when I was a time where I was smoking like a lot of weed and I wanted to quit, and then when I quit, I needed something to sort of like take my brain
Focus
on
on.
a journey, and I was reading all these books on it. I became obsessed with this Australian podcast called Mysterious Universe. They talk about all this stuff like that and aliens and cryptozoology. I was so into that stuff for a while. I thought I was gonna find Bigfoot. And then what is it called? Is it dream paralysis? What's the thing where I had it happen once or twice where I was awake but I couldn't move. I forget what they call that.
I haven't
Um
heard about that either.
I don't
You're
know.
awake. So you're actually awake. You're not sleeping.
Or I was awake. It was awake, but I was essentially paralyzed for like maybe the time also was distorted for like a few. There's a term for it, but I forget what it is. I think it might be sleep paralysis, is what they call it. I don't know, but
That's
I
probably so terrifying.
right. I did find that just back to the nature of how suggestive we are. The more that I dug into these things, it's not like I could listen to podcasts on Bigfoot and Bigfoot's going to knock on my door. But some of these things that happen in your mind, the more you dive into them, you do manifest them in a certain way, and it shows how malleable our brains really are, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with aliens as well, though, right? Like the universe is so big. There's so many galaxies, like trillions, trillions. There's got to be something. So why
No, no,
couldn't it be?
no. It wasn't mentioned in the Bible. You don't get it.
I, I don't know. There's like a planet out there with some Bigfoot on it.
I
Like
know. I
we're
hope
gonna
so.
get Bigfoot. We're gonna get the Yeti. They're out there.
Yeah.
Gonna find them.
So we're right now in
There's
a
got to
time.
be something. There's no
I
way there's
right.
not something.
Right.
So
It is funny though. We were watching over here a Bigfoot hunting show not that long ago, and it was like 8 episodes in a row, and I got sucked into it. As I just said, I only watch TV with purpose. This was like maybe like a month ago. But it was funny how long that they can stretch out the smallest bit of evidence, because it's like I'm 8 episodes in. Spoiler that they
and
haven't
were
found.
you still like they're gonna find a Bigfoot?
Well, it was more of like my brain started going around the idea of like, okay, did the people who paid for this show actually pay for it thinking they're going to find a Bigfoot, or do they pay for it thinking that it's going to be funny to watch idiots try to find a Bigfoot? And I realized it was more of the second one. But they will stretch out anything to make it seem like they're going to find this Bigfoot, as if everybody who knows it's like, look, this is not live. If they had found a Bigfoot, it would have been on like The Guardian. It would have been on
It
like
would have been
CNN. It
everywhere.
would have been everywhere. And it's still, I'm watching as if they're going to find one. And, I don't know what that says about me.
Well, that sounds like purpose. I like that. That's purpose watching TV.
Yeah. Because at a certain point, like when what I'm watching is so insane, my brain has to go to well, how did this actually happen? And why is this happening? And, is there more than 10 people actually watching this? Because I swear there are a lot of things that I see posters for that I swear no one's watching. I go by things on Netflix. I'm like, if you told me that 0 people have ever watched this, I wouldn't be surprised. You know.
Oh, now I'm kind of intrigued. Now I want to find something I think no one's watching.
Well, if you want to find someone no one's listening to, you can check out my music.
Oh, you're too harsh on yourself.
No, but it is funny though that like so if I release a song on my own where it's just me, I'll get maybe like 100 listens. But if I put someone on there who's like someone who's known in the mainstream, all of a sudden I'm getting like thousands and thousands of listens. And you do understand how much a cosign really does help,
Yeah, but I mean, hundreds is still
I know
Cool. I mean,
it's still nice. You know, there was a
uh,
day where you definitely couldn't do.
that's way more listens than I get people looking at my art.
And I think too, a lot of art. People turn to art for validation, and I think it's the wrong sort of validation they're looking for. They're looking for someone else to tell them that it's great, or looking for someone else to pay them for it. But I just don't know whether that experience is everything that it's cracked up to be. The people, because I've gotten little bits of that in my life, and it hasn't been as fulfilling as I think I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, no, and it's not why you do it, right?
Well, I think it becomes why some people do it, but I think that just takes them further away from what they actually wanted. I mean, we live in a very capitalist society here, and if you're not making money off something, what's the point? And I see that, like, a lot of people I know. I see people in my life that are like 45 and they're like, I'm going to be a real estate agent now, because that's like, it's like no one can have a hobby that isn't about making money. And I think there's a lot of value in having hobbies that aren't about making money.
Yeah. If it hasn't already been published, I'm sure there's research that shows it just makes for healthier humans.
Yeah, I'm sure that. I'm
Yeah,
sure.
both physically and mentally healthy. Like, we all need outlets. Like, you can't, we're always on. We're constantly on.
Right. I
So,
think what stops a lot of people is that we sort of hinted at this before, but they don't want to. People have a tendency not to want to outgrow the people around them, and if somebody's living in an environment with people that just don't want to grow and want to watch that same Bigfoot show over and over again, no offense to what I did that day,
maybe on the fifth time, they'll
yeah,
find the Bigfoot.
maybe they will. But like they feel that, well, if I grow, will that alienate me from the people around me? And a lot of times that's true, but it's also not a bad thing.
No, I think as humans, when we get us, I think so many just people just don't realize, like, you have to constantly learn, constantly grow, constantly work on the person you want to be, right? Like,
Right.
it's never finished. It's like when you have a dog, right? You don't just train them for the first month and then, like, let them, you do it forever.
Right. And
Just
give
part of,
others the space to do the same.
yeah. And so but so many people are like, oh, I've done that now. Like, I don't need to grow and learn. It's like we have to our entire lives, because we change as people. The stuff around us changes us.
Right. And a lot of people, I think, pick the people in their lives the same way they would pick a painting. Like, okay, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna hang it on the wall, and that's what it's gonna be. Like, this is what I've invested in. So it has to be this. And they don't understand that we
Yeah.
oftentimes outgrow each other, or people just move in different directions. They don't want.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Human nature, I do not understand it at all, which is probably also the reason I have these types of
Yeah.
this type of art.
What would you say your goals are with art at this point in your journey?
I don't know. It makes me feel good. That's why I do it. I enjoy it, right? Like, it just brings me pleasure. So,
Yeah.
and it all started with COVID and lockdown, and there's not much we could do, right? You're powerless, right? There's not much you could do, and you could see all these things unfolding around you. How do you make sense of them? And I feel often that way, like Turkey now, you've got that earthquake. It's like over 25,000 dead so far in Turkey. Or, you've got the war in Yemen, which you talk about for 5 minutes and then the news cycle moves on, people
Right.
forget about it. And it's kind of like a piece of art, right? You go and see it in the museum, and then, oh, I've done my culture for now, right? Like, I've looked at it, and that's it.
Right. I mean, there's still people suffering from the earthquake in Haiti, and that feels like, if you told me that was 2 years ago or 15 years ago, I'd have to go Google either way, because it just becomes there's still people suffering from Katrina.
Yeah. God. And yeah, so it's kind of a mixture of that, right? It's like just making sense of all these things that go on, but also I find it super relaxing. So after working, I draw. I'm either doing superheroes or I'm doing my drawing.
Yeah. And it is a world you can fall into, and it's not someone else's world.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
bringing yourself outside instead of bringing the outside into yourself more.
Yeah.
One thing that comes up a lot in the podcast, because I bring it up a lot, is different artists have different relationships with the stuff they've done earlier in their lives. Like, maybe art you've done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or even as a child. And some people I've found that they don't want, like, maybe their old songs out there because they're embarrassed by them, or they don't want, like, you know, they just feel anger at their old art, or they look at it and go, I'll never be that good again. I don't have that relationship. I'm sort of like, I pick up old things all the time, and I you know, recycle them or bring them back around.
Yeah.
What are your feelings about stuff that you've done in the past and how it impacts yourself as an artist now?
I guess pretty similar to you. Like I recycle a lot. And I actually have like old paper collages that I would have done, and they're bits of a lot of the new ones that you can actually see them in the old like photos I took of the old collages. Um, I recycle a lot of my old drawings, or I look at them again. And there's only a few that I probably don't like looking at, but that's because they make me feel uncomfortable, or they remind me of a time I would probably not want to remember.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, I don't have that kind of emotional attachment to them in some ways.
Yeah, I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
It's you, they're versions of you that don't exist anymore. And I think
Yeah,
that's an
exactly.
interesting concept in general, that like you can access parts of you that have lived and, you know, sort of died off but still remain in some sort of form, you know.
Yeah. And if you put them in a chronological order, it's quite interesting because you can kind of see not just the change in the art style or the medium, because I did sculpture for a while as well, and
Yeah.
or you see like the faces, yeah, the faces in your life, the people that you were, and then how you grew and how you changed.
I've been doing
Yeah.
that with Mac Miller, someone who I didn't really know his music very well, but in the past few years I've gotten to know it a lot better. And I've been listening to all of his work from like earlier to the end. You know, he probably made music for about 10 to 15 years in his life before he unfortunately passed away. And just watching his growth over time to me was very eye-opening and very inspiring. And it just, you realize that if you live life properly, you can live multiple different lives, and
Yeah.
you can be it's sometimes it's like you can be a complex human being and just say, I'm changing, and I'm not what I
Yeah.
was yesterday. Is like, you know, yesterday's price is not today's price, you know. It's I think so many people are just so resistant to change, especially for themselves and those around them. And I think art in general gives us that opportunity to change and grow and express ourselves in ways that we might not be able to do verbally. You know, I'm really breaking ground with that
Yeah.
hot take, but
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more with that. Like it's most people don't like change in themselves or in others or around them in any shape or form. And
yeah,
then, or they see change as admitting that there's something about them that they either didn't like or that needed change.
right.
And they
Change
don't
is
see it in a
tied up with
positive way,
shame.
right?
It's like it's tied
Yeah.
up with shame and guilt.
Yeah. It means I did something wrong because I have to change, as opposed to I've been learning and I'm evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the greatest lessons I've learned in life is the good news and bad news is nobody's thinking about you. In that, like, you sort of think that, oh, what do all these people think? What do they, you know,
Yeah.
what do they think about me? And the reality is they're not thinking about me at all. And that's both, it's both good and bad, but I more find it freeing than anything. You know, it's like,
I like that. I hadn't heard that expression. I like that one.
yeah, it is. It's like at moments you can choose your moments too. When you're like, okay, well, I'm going to put something out there that I want people to think about me, and this, and then it's like you can kind of choose those moments. But it's like the idea that like I'm like, there have been times in my life that I've been on the elliptical for like an hour and a half at a time, going, oh, people are really going to think I look good, and I'm just like, no, they're not going to give a shit. Like, you know, it's like they do. Why do I care? You know.
Because going back to what we were saying about kids is we always compare ourselves. It's like human
Yeah.
nature, right? We're always pitting ourselves against something.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you do a piece, how much do does the sharing of it to people enrich the experience of making it? Or I sometimes have the feeling that once it's done, I don't really care what people think of it after, that it's really for me, and now it's time to move. Yeah, you're similar. Yeah,
Yeah.
the
For me, it's
experience
more
is probably better,
it's
more about the end
it's
result.
during it because it
Yeah.
kind of it can take, it can take a long time for me to finish a piece. And sometimes during it, it's more sharing it during it because you sometimes get ideas you wouldn't have had otherwise, or someone might comment and you go, oh yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
but afterwards, it's almost like a scientific paper. Once it's done, it's published, you move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
um, it's kind of, yeah, when it's done, it's finished.
I think one of my biggest achievements as an artist is that I don't remember really any of the negative feedback I've gotten. over the years.
Oh
Like,
God, see, I do. See, oh, I do.
the only thing that sticks with me is that if I'll show something to my parents and they'll just be like I played a song for my dad that I made, and it was a song that I had to spend a bunch of money on, so I had to get people on it. And I'm like, just like if you're curious, I'm like, this is what a whatever $1,000 song sounds like. And he's listened to it and he goes, well, I guess you gotta learn from your mistakes. And I'm just like, I think you missed, maybe I missed, whatever. I was just trying to bring him in my world a little bit, and it was just me, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, that's hilarious. I'm like,
Oh,
no, I think the
that's
song's been
funny.
pretty, I think people are like that when it comes out. I thought that was funny. Um, but I also too, I think people seek validation from people that have no like what can I expect playing a rap song from my parents? They don't have the context, they don't have the reference, they've never watched MTV, they've never watched any of this stuff. And it's just like you can't, and I think a lot of people worry about what their parents are gonna think. And I'm like, you can't worry about what your parents are gonna think. Like you can't, you know, and
Well,
especially
we shouldn't really worry about what anyone thinks,
right,
but at least in my case, I know sometimes I do, and I probably do too much, and I sit there going, why do I care?
right,
But I do.
right.
Yeah.
I was proud that I got a point in my life where I've realized that I can learn as much, if not more, from people younger than me than people that are older than me. I mean, there's certain things you can only learn from people that are older and wiser than you, but there's a lot you can learn from people that are younger than you. And a lot of that stuff is more
Yeah.
valuable on a day-to-day basis.
So I definitely agree with the younger, but I think I don't agree with the older because I would say it depends on the type of older person, right? If it's someone who is constantly like learning and looking
Right.
to
Yep.
evolve as a person, there's so much to learn. But then again, if it's someone who's so like stuck in their ways and their own kind of views, and you kind of learn what not to do,
Yeah.
which can be just as valuable, right? It's like, I don't, that's not how I want to, that's not
Yeah.
how I want to be.
I was having this conversation with a friend recently, and they were talking about a grandparent of theirs that was just a major pain in the ass. That was just a racist jerk or whatever. And in like this person had sort of been shunned a little bit from the family because of this behavior. And I'm like, isn't it wonderful that we're kind of the first generation that doesn't have to tolerate like a lot of these people that are just racist, stuck in their way assholes that are in their 80s have grown up their entire life thinking that when they get old they'll be respected because they're old. But now we live in a time where it's okay to say, hey, fuck you. Like, I don't care that you're my grandmother. You're an asshole and you're ruining my life and you're emotionally like abusing the people around you. And I think a lot of people grew up thinking that that wasn't a reality, and they're realizing that that is a reality in this day and
Yeah.
age.
Well, I mean, I guess so many kids are taught, like, especially those generations, right? You're taught like what better seen, not heard,
Right.
um, deference to your elders at all times. And
Right.
it's true, yeah.
If a weird
This,
uncle wants to hug you, then you better hug him and stuff like that. You're not taught autonomy of your own
yeah,
body,
your
your own
creepy uncle wants to hug you, you hug him.
right.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
disgusting.
yeah, you just don't. Yeah, it's true. There's less, but it's good, right? We should be questioning things, right? Because we're all going to have our own biases and our own,
Yeah.
most of the time we might not even realize we have them. We should be called out on it,
Right. Right. Right.
right? Like, God, I would be mortified if I had some kind of horrible bias that I wasn't aware of, and I'd want someone to call me out on it.
Right. And it's especially people that are compassionate and actually want to talk to you about it, because
Yeah.
like I mentioned before, there's been times that I've wanted to lash out at people, but I've always taken a step backwards to do it in the most compassionate way possible.
Yeah. Compassionate education is the only way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a scary thing to some people.
Yeah.
Wow, we've already been talking for a
Oh
while
my
here.
God, it's already like an hour?
Yeah.
You got me to talk for an hour. Like,
Well, we probably should wrap up. We both have things you have to do. But is there anything else you want to mention or talk about, or upcoming things that you're working on, or just shout out to
yeah,
anybody
so
listening at home?
yeah, no, just kind of working on my next art piece, and a children's book. So
Excellent.
how that goes.
What do you anything you want to share about that, or?
Yeah, so especially during COVID, there wasn't much to do. We were locked down for quite a long time over here. So every evening I would tell my daughter a story, and then it turned into almost like an oral chapter book. And we started recording it together. And
Wow.
not too long ago, she's like, "Oh, will you type it up for me?" So I've been typing it up, and we're now on chapter 16.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it's about a young girl who gets pulled into this kind of intergalactic highway and ends up on a planet millions of years ago. Millions of
Wow.
years away, sorry. So we'll see.
That's
Again,
awesome.
people might think it's crap, but it's been really fun doing it. So
Yeah. Well, the people think it's crap thing is it's like U2 might be the most famous band in the world, but there's more people out there that don't like them that do like them or that don't care about them. So it's like, who gives a shit? You know, you
yeah,
know.
who cares?
Yeah. I mean,
It's just been fun. And it's
yeah,
something we've done together, so it's kind of nice.
right. And that is beautiful too, to share the creative spirit
Yeah.
with your children. And then, who knows what they're gonna grow up and take with it, because as I
Yeah,
sort of
exactly.
made that comment about my dad is also somebody who's inspired me a lot in terms of he's always stuck to, he's always been very passionate about what he's passionate about. And he's always stuck with it his entire life. And for me, I've gotten a lot of that spirit of being like, okay, if you care about something, you can really put your all into it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like it's awesome all the stuff that you do. Like every time I like turn around, there's something else. There's like a podcast, there's
Yeah.
music, there's art, we have one of your paintings in
Oh,
the house. Really
yes.
cool.
I like that
Um,
one. I think that one's been on my Twitter background for like ever since I think I made it. I love
it's
that piece.
so cool. It's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes you wonder what I'm running from.
Or what you're just, I don't know. If
Running
you're running
towards
from
maybe.
something, it's the output of that is awesome.
Yeah, well, I hope so. But all right, well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I don't know, we'll put like your social media stuff under here, so we'll make sure that all that goes out. But thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.